My name is Henry. I'm 38, a technology entrepreneur, blessed, or perhaps cursed, with a net worth nearing $500 million, according to the most recent valuation of my firm. I reside in the perpetually overcast city of Seattle, a place where the aroma of freshly brewed coffee and the glow of neon signs blend seamlessly into the misty atmosphere. My home, a contemporary masterpiece of glass and steel, perches atop a hill overlooking Puget Sound. Every morning, I awaken beside my beloved wife, Isabella, and our 12-month-old son, Samuel, a cherubic infant with eyes that sparkle like distant stars. Yet, despite the seemingly idyllic facade of my life, a life meticulously crafted and often showcased on social media, a profound chasm lies beneath the surface, a rift that money, fame, and even the most extravagant celebrations cannot mend. This fracture stems from my family, specifically from my parents, Richard and Patricia. I grew up in a small rural community several hours from Seattle, a place dominated by endless fields of wheat under a relentlessly gray sky. My parents were far from affectionate. My father, Richard, a gruff mechanic with calloused hands and a volatile temper, was prone to fits of anger. His harsh words often escalated into physical abuse, leaving welts on my face for minor transgressions, such as spilling a glass of juice or forgetting my assignments. My mother, Patricia, was different. She never struck me, but her icy stare, sharp and penetrating, always made me feel like an irredeemable disappointment. We weren't impoverished, but we certainly weren't affluent. Our family life was a constant cycle of tension and relentless arguments. At 15, I resolved to escape that suffocating existence. I refused to become another version of my father, a bitter man consumed by resentment, or my mother, a woman perpetually lamenting her perceived shortcomings. I dedicated myself to my studies, securing a scholarship that enabled me to attend the California Institute of Technology, Caltech. There, I discovered my passion for computer science, for the intricate dance of code that transforms abstract concepts into tangible realities. At 26, I launched my initial venture. By 31, I'd sold it for a staggering $300 million. And at 38, my second company, a revolutionary augmented reality platform, is poised to achieve multi-billion-dollar valuations. I've become one of the nation's most prominent young entrepreneurs, frequently featured in leading business publications, invited to exclusive industry gatherings, and living in a home that once seemed like a fantastical dream. But wealth doesn't erase the memories of nights spent huddled in fear, listening to my parents' acrimonious disputes. It doesn't heal the emotional wounds inflicted by their neglect and abuse. Most importantly, it hasn't transformed them into the nurturing parents I've always longed for. When my financial success began, I naively believed I could rectify everything. I commissioned a complete renovation of my parents' outdated home, transforming it into a spacious and comfortable residence. I gifted them a luxurious beachfront estate valued at over $15 million, a sprawling oasis boasting lush gardens and an infinity pool overlooking the turquoise ocean. A top-of-the-line luxury SUV, a vehicle my father had always coveted, joined their newfound assets. I generously covered their living expenses, including utilities, healthcare, and even opulent vacations my mother flaunted within the community. Each month, I provided them with $15,000 in discretionary funds, an amount I believed would ensure their comfort, if not outright extravagance. However, I underestimated the depths of human avarice. Every phone call from my mother was punctuated by complaints about their perceived needs: a larger television, a trip to Bora Bora, funds to invest in my father's nebulous business schemes. I attempted to appease their insatiable demands, not out of a desire to show off my wealth, but rather to atone for leaving them behind, to alleviate the guilt of my success while they remained trapped in their mundane lives. But the more I gave, the more they craved. My mother's phone calls became laced with an unnervingly saccharine tone, filled with hollow praise for her wonderful son. My father would pat me on the shoulder, declaring me the pride of the family. Yet his eyes revealed a predatory gleam, viewing me as nothing more than a walking ATM. Isabella, my perceptive wife, saw through their charade before I did. With her keen insight, she recognized the hollowness of their affection. "Henry," she remarked one evening as we sat by the fireplace, "I don't think your parents love you because you're their son. I think they love you for your bank account." I dismissed her words with a laugh, but deep down, I knew she was right. I simply refused to acknowledge that painful truth. Isabella has always been my guiding star. We met 6 years ago at a technology summit in San Diego. She was a prominent investigative journalist focusing on the ethical implications of artificial intelligence. I was captivated by her insightful questions, questions that weren't designed to flatter, but to penetrate the carefully constructed facade I presented to the world. After the conference session, I invited her for coffee, and from that moment, we were inseparable. Samuel's birth completed our family. That tiny human, his chubby fingers clutching my finger, was everything I'd ever hoped for. Looking at Samuel, I vowed he would never experience the fear and loneliness that had defined my childhood. Isabella and I dedicated ourselves to him. From the sleepless nights of diaper changes to the joyous mornings of watching him giggle in his crib, our expansive home transformed into a warm haven filled with Samuel's laughter and cries. However, happiness, I've learned, is as fragile as a flickering candle in a gale-force wind. And that unexpected wind originated from the very people I considered my family. That Thanksgiving, we decided to visit my parents in their hometown. I wasn't enthusiastic about the visit, but Isabella persuaded me. Their family, Henry, regardless of everything. They're your parents, and Samuel should meet his grandparents. I reluctantly agreed, though a heavy weight settled in my chest. I didn't want Samuel to grow up without knowing his grandparents, but the prospect of confronting my parents filled me with dread, transporting me back to that 10-year-old boy cowering in the corner of his room. The journey was meticulously planned. We drove for over 3 hours, equipped with a suitcase full of toys and diapers for Samuel. My parents' house, my childhood home, had undergone a significant transformation thanks to my financial contributions. It was no longer the dilapidated wooden structure with moss-covered shingles, but a bright 2-story residence with modern furnishings and a meticulously landscaped garden my mother proudly showcased as her masterpiece. Yet, upon entering, the familiar chill remained, as if the walls themselves held the echoes of those painful memories. My mother's hug was excessively tight and prolonged, her smile so effusive that its authenticity was questionable. "Henry, my dear boy, look at you, so successful, and still remembering your parents," she gushed. My father's clap on my shoulder was forceful enough to nearly knock me off balance. "Good job, son. I'm proud of you," he declared. I offered a forced smile, exchanging a knowing glance with Isabella. She subtly shook her head, a silent message of reassurance. "Stay calm. It will be all right." Samuel, nestled in Isabella's arms, yawned and fidgeted. My mother practically snatched him from Isabella, showering him with effusive affection I'd never received myself. "Oh, my sweet grandson, so adorable. Look at that nose, just like his father's," she cooed. Isabella smiled politely, but I noticed her grip on her purse tighten. She was clearly uncomfortable. And so was I. That evening, we shared a family dinner. My mother presented a traditional roast turkey, boasting of her meticulous preparations. My father uncorked a bottle of expensive wine I had brought, launching into an incessant monologue about his latest investment ventures. "Henry," he began, "if you could lend me some capital, I could open a much larger auto repair shop. This town desperately needs one." I nodded, promising to consider his proposal, but all I wanted was for the evening to conclude. That night, as Isabella and I lay in the guest room, Samuel sleeping peacefully in his crib, I felt an unsettling unease. I couldn't pinpoint the source of my anxiety. Was it my mother's gaze toward Samuel, a mixture of affection and something darker? Or my father's persistent inquiries about my company, my wealth, my future plans? I shook my head, dismissing my concerns as overthinking. They were my parents. They weren't perfect, but they were family. And family doesn't hurt each other, right? I was tragically, irrevocably wrong. I didn't realize that within hours my world would shatter. I didn't know that the flame of my happiness was about to be extinguished, and that the very people I called family would be the agents of its destruction. The following morning, my wife and I awoke to the quiet suburban atmosphere. My mother was bustling in the kitchen, preparing a lavish lunch. My father was seated in the living room, engrossed in the newspaper. Upon seeing me, he immediately beckoned me to the backyard to showcase his latest gardening project, which consisted of a few stunted marigold plants. Isabella was still upstairs, caring for Samuel. I heard her laughter and Samuel's delighted gurgles, and for a fleeting moment, my anxieties seemed to dissipate. But that tranquility was short-lived. As lunchtime approached, my mother suggested we run to a nearby convenience store, roughly 15 minutes away by car. "You two go ahead," she said, her voice sweet yet unsettling. "Leave Samuel with me." Isabella glanced at me, her eyes flickering with hesitation. "Are you sure, Mom?" she asked. "Samuel's only 12 months old. He can be quite fussy." "Oh, don't worry," my mother replied, dismissing her concerns with a laugh. "I raised Henry, didn't I? Looking after a baby is no trouble. Go on. You two need some time alone." My father nodded in agreement, clapping me on the shoulder. "Listen to your mother, Henry. She's got this." I looked at Isabella, seeking her opinion. She gave a subtle nod, although I noticed her grip on her purse tighten. "All right," she said. "But please, Mom, don't let Samuel play with small toys. Yesterday, I saw you holding that plastic rattle with tiny beads. It's a choking hazard. Samuel puts everything in his mouth." My mother laughed dismissively. "Don't worry, Elena. I know. I'll only let him play with safe toys." Isabella hesitated but ultimately agreed, kissing Samuel goodbye and whispering, "Mommy will be back soon, my love." We left the house and drove to the store. I tried to savor the rare moments of solitude with my wife, but my thoughts kept returning to Samuel. "Are you all right?" I asked. She took a sip of her coffee, her gaze distant. "I don't know, Henry. Your mother," she began. "I'm not sure she's as cautious as she claims. I just have a bad feeling." "You're worrying too much," I replied, although I didn't fully believe my own words. "Mom's not perfect, but she wouldn't let anything happen to Samuel. He's her grandson." Isabella nodded, but I could tell she wasn't convinced. She stared out the window, absently twisting her coffee cup. Roughly 30 minutes later, after purchasing the items my mother had requested, and as we were about to depart, my phone rang. My mother's name appeared on the screen. I smiled, assuming she was calling to gush about Samuel's cuteness, but when I answered, her voice was trembling, filled with panic. "Henry," she gasped, You need to come back now. Samuel, he's not breathing." My heart lurched. I heard Isabella gasp, her coffee cup slipping from her grasp and shattering on the floor. "What did you say?" I shouted into the phone, my voice cracking. "What's wrong with Samuel? What are you talking about? Come back now," my mother screamed, then abruptly ended the call. I don't recall the details of our frantic return. The rush to the car, Isabella's tears, her desperate plea to hurry. All I remember is the image of Samuel, my precious son, his smile etched in my mind. No, it couldn't be. He couldn't. I couldn't complete the thought. When we burst into the house, my mother was standing in the living room, her face ashen, clutching her chest. My father stood beside her, his eyes wide with terror. "Henry, Isabella," my mother stammered, tears streaming down her face. I don't know what happened. I only left the room for a moment, and when I returned, Samuel wasn't breathing. I tried to shake him, but she trailed off, sobbing uncontrollably. I rushed to the crib where Samuel lay motionless, his eyes closed, his skin pale and bluish. I touched him, hoping to feel warmth, but his body was cold. "Samuel!" I screamed, my voice shattering. Isabella collapsed beside me, cradling Samuel, sobbing uncontrollably. "My baby, Mommy's here. Open your eyes, please." I don't know how long I cried, how long I held Samuel and my wife in my arms. All I know is that when the police and paramedics arrived, they had to pry me away from him. A female paramedic, her hair pulled back in a tight ponytail, began chest compressions and administered oxygen. Her movements were swift and efficient, but I saw the exchange of glances between her and her colleague, a look that held no hope. Isabella clung to me, her nails digging into my arm. "They'll save him, right?" she whispered, her voice wavering, as if she already knew the answer. I remained silent, holding her close, my eyes fixed on Samuel. After what felt like an eternity, but was only minutes, the paramedic looked up, shaking her head slightly. "I'm so sorry," she said, her voice hushed. "The child shows no signs of life. We did everything we could." I let out a heart-wrenching wail and collapsed to the floor. My mother stood in the corner, her face buried in her hands, sobbing uncontrollably. "Henry, she began, but I couldn't hear the rest. My father stood beside her, pale and speechless. "How did this happen?" he muttered. Two police officers immediately sprang into action. A tall officer with a deep voice introduced himself as Officer Davies. He instructed us to step back to preserve the crime scene. "I know this is a devastating time," he said, his tone empathetic yet professional. "But we need to understand what happened. Who discovered the child?" My mother spoke up, her voice choked with emotion. She began, then trailed off. "I only left the room for a moment to get some water, and when I came back, Samuel wasn't breathing. I tried to shake him, but—" Officer Davies diligently took notes while a young female officer began photographing the scene. She carefully examined the crib and picked up a small piece of plastic, a fragment of the toy Isabella had warned my mother about. "We found this in the crib," she announced, placing the fragment in an evidence bag. "This could be the cause." Choking hazard. Isabella, still trembling in my arms, suddenly looked up. "I told her that toy was dangerous," she said, her voice icy despite her tears. "I specifically warned her not to let it near Samuel." Officer Davies made another note but remained silent. The atmosphere grew thick with unspoken accusations. After the paramedics departed, Samuel's body was transported to the medical examiner's office for an autopsy. Officer Davies explained that it was standard procedure in cases of unexplained infant death. "We need to determine the precise cause," he said. "It's likely a choking incident, but we must be certain. You'll be notified of the results as soon as possible." The police remained for another hour, thoroughly investigating the house and questioning us and my parents. They questioned my mother about her activities before discovering Samuel's lifeless body, and asked Isabella and me about Samuel's habits, the toy, and any other pertinent details. I answered mechanically, my mind numb, consumed by the overwhelming desire to hold Samuel again. Isabella responded clearly, but I noticed her eyes darting toward my mother, sharp and assessing. That night, Isabella and I found no solace in sleep. We sat in the living room, beside Samuel's empty crib, enveloped in silence. The pain was a relentless monster, gnawing at my heart. Isabella leaned against my shoulder, her body rigid, battling an inner turmoil. My mother attempted to comfort us, hugging Isabella and offering apologies, but I observed Isabella subtly pulling away from her embrace, her eyes filled with suspicion. The next morning, as we prepared to leave, Isabella pulled me aside in the backyard. Out of earshot, her eyes were red-rimmed, but her voice was steady. "Henry," she whispered, "I don't believe this was an accident. Your mother knew that toy was dangerous. I warned her, but she still left it in the crib. Don't you find that peculiar?" I wanted to argue, to tell her that her grief was clouding her judgment, but something in her tone, in her gaze, stopped me. I glanced at the house, where my mother was washing dishes, appearing distraught, and my father sat silently at the table, flipping through the newspaper. They seemed like grieving grandparents, but my mother's eyes, when they briefly met mine through the window, held a chilling coldness, a mask of false grief. Isabella said nothing more, but I knew she felt it too. As the priest delivered the final prayer at Samuel's graveside, Isabella squeezed my hand and whispered, "Henry, let's go home." We returned to our hillside home, but it no longer felt like a sanctuary. Gone were Samuel's laughter and Isabella's lullabies. Only a heavy silence remained, a leaden weight on my chest. Each night, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, trying to conjure Samuel's face, but all I could see was his lifeless body in his crib, his eyes forever closed. Several weeks after the funeral, while the pain still felt raw, my parents unexpectedly appeared at our doorstep. My mother embraced me, tears streaming down her face. "Henry, my dear boy," she sobbed, her voice choked with emotion. "Your father, and I can't bear the thought of you and Isabella suffering alone. We're family. Let us stay with you for a while, to help you both through this." My father nodded, clapping me on the shoulder. "That's right, son. We want to be here for you." Isabella stood behind me, silent. I looked at her, seeking her approval, but she only offered a subtle nod, her lips pressed tightly together. I knew she didn't want them there, but I lacked the strength to refuse. The grief of losing Samuel had drained me, and a part of me, the weak part, the part that still yearned for a family, hoped their presence might somehow fill the void. They moved in, bringing with them a few suitcases of clothing and an endless stream of empty words of comfort. My mother cooked elaborate meals daily. My father fussed around the house, repairing things that didn't need fixing. A loose kitchen cabinet door, a perfectly functional light bulb in the garage. Initially, I believed their intentions were genuine, but within days I began to notice unsettling signs. Isabella was the first to detect something amiss. One morning, during breakfast, she pushed her plate of eggs away, grimacing. "Henry," she said, "I feel so fatigued. My head feels like it's buzzing." I nodded, for I felt the same. I tossed and turned every night, even with the aid of sleeping pills. My vision blurred, and my body felt heavy, as if burdened by an invisible cloud. "It's probably stress from work," I said, trying to reassure myself, "and Samuel's loss." But Isabella disagreed. "No, Henry, this isn't normal. I've never felt this way before. Ever since your parents arrived, we've both been getting worse." She spoke softly, glancing toward the kitchen, where my mother was washing dishes, humming a familiar tune. I wanted to dismiss her concerns, but I couldn't deny that my own health was deteriorating. The dizziness, the insomnia, the inexplicable fatigue, it all began after my parents moved in. I tried to rationalize it. They were my parents. They'd lost their grandson. They were merely trying to help. But then a memory surfaced, a detail I'd previously overlooked. A few days earlier, I'd overheard my mother on the phone in the living room, her voice hushed and urgent. I know, but we need more time. I'll take care of it." When I entered the room, she quickly hung up, offering a forced smile. "Just an old friend, dear," she explained, but her eyes avoided mine. Doubt began to gnaw at me, but I wasn't ready to confront it. Not until one morning, when everything changed forever. We were en route to an appointment with a grief counselor, a desperate attempt to cope with Samuel's loss. Isabella sat beside me in silence, her hands clasped tightly. The winding mountain road stretched before us, with steep cliffs on one side and dense pine forests on the other. I was trying to lighten the mood, discussing a new project at work, when suddenly the car lurched violently. The brakes failed. I slammed on the pedal, but it was unresponsive. "Henry!" Isabella screamed, grasping the door handle. I wrestled with the steering wheel, attempting to maintain control, but the car careened toward the edge of the road at terrifying speed. The screech of metal echoed as we struck the guardrail, the car flipping onto its side. My head slammed against the window, searing pain shooting through me. Isabella screamed, Then everything went black. When I regained consciousness, I was lying on a stretcher, the flashing lights of an ambulance cutting through the downpour. Isabella was beside me, her head bandaged, her face scratched and bruised. "Are you okay?" she whispered, her voice trembling. I nodded, although my left leg throbbed intensely. Later, doctors confirmed a fractured femur. Isabella suffered a mild concussion and superficial lacerations. We were fortunate to survive, but as I lay in the hospital bed, gazing at Isabella's pale face, I knew this was no random accident. The days that followed were a blur of pain and mounting suspicion. I was discharged from the hospital on crutches, armed with a hefty supply of painkillers. Isabella, despite her lingering headaches, insisted on caring for me, but we both knew that our physical injuries were the least of our concerns. The suspicion surrounding my parents, the people I once considered family, despite their flaws, gnawed at us incessantly. My parents remained in our home, continuing their charade of a loving family. My mother prepared lavish meals, constantly inquiring about our health, while my father lingered in the garage, claiming he was inspecting the replacement car provided by the insurance company. "Let me handle it, son," he said, patting my shoulder with a smile I no longer trusted. "You rest." But I couldn't rest. Every time I looked into my mother's eyes, I saw that same chilling gaze, a gaze I'd initially dismissed as my imagination. Every time my father patted my shoulder, it felt like he was sizing me up, assessing me as prey. And our health continued to deteriorate. The dizziness, insomnia, and inexplicable fatigue persisted. I began to wonder if this was truly just stress or something far more sinister. Suspicion was no longer a small thorn. It was a raging inferno in my chest. I started scrutinizing every detail. My mother's insistence on preparing our meals, my father's frequent trips to the garage. I thought back to the accident, the failed brakes, the erratic steering, and a terrifying possibility flashed into my mind. Had my father tampered with my car? The opportunity arose one evening during a conversation with my neighbor, Mr. Robert. He was an elderly gentleman living alone, but his house was equipped with a state-of-the-art security camera system. "Henry, I heard about the accident," he said, his voice filled with concern. "Are you and Isabella all right? You're lucky to be alive." I nodded, forcing a weak smile. "Thanks, Robert. Just bad luck, I guess." Then I remembered his cameras, which were strategically positioned to capture our garage. "Hey, Robert," I said, keeping my voice calm. "Did your cameras record anything the night before the accident around our garage?" Robert raised an eyebrow, but didn't pry further. "Let me check." I hobbled after him, each step a challenge, but the adrenaline coursing through me masked the pain. In Robert's cozy living room, we reviewed the security footage. The images were crystal clear. My father opening the hood of my car, leaning over the engine for over 20 minutes, then casually walking away as if nothing had happened. My blood ran cold. My heart pounded in my chest. "Can you send me this video?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "Of course, Henry," Robert replied, his eyes filled with worry. "Are you okay? Is something wrong?" I shook my head, not wanting to involve him in this dangerous web. "Just need to check some things." "Thanks, Robert." Back home, I didn't immediately inform Isabella. I needed time to process what I'd seen, but the suspicion had hardened into undeniable truth. My father had tampered with the car. And if Isabella was right, if my mother had deliberately placed that toy in Samuel's crib, then we were living with monsters. I decided to proceed discreetly. Using advanced surveillance software from my company, I installed hidden cameras throughout the house. In the kitchen, living room, and garage. I shared my plan with Isabella that night, after my parents had retired. "We need proof," I whispered. "If they're truly trying to harm us, I won't let them get away with it." Isabella nodded, her eyes resolute. "But we have to be careful, Henry. If they suspect anything, I don't know what they'll do next." A few days later, the cameras captured something that sent a chill down my spine. In the kitchen, as my mother prepared dinner, she discreetly retrieved a small, unlabeled glass jar from her apron pocket. She glanced around cautiously, then sprinkled a pinch of the contents onto Isabella's and my plates. Her movements were swift, practiced, as if she'd done this many times before. My throat tightened. The dizziness, insomnia, fatigue. It all made sense. I turned to Isabella, who was watching the footage with me on the laptop. "They're poisoning us," I said, my voice breaking. Isabella covered her mouth, tears welling in her eyes. "Henry, what do we do now?" I didn't answer immediately. All I knew was that the seasoning jar was the key. The next day, while my parents were out, I retrieved the glass jar from the kitchen cabinet, carefully extracted a small sample of the powder inside, and took it to a private laboratory connected to my company. "Test this," I instructed the lab manager, "and do it as quickly as possible." The results arrived 3 days later, confirming my worst fears. The substance in the jar was a slow-acting poison that caused cumulative liver and neurological damage. It was nearly undetectable without specialized testing. I sat in my office, staring at the report, feeling as if the world was collapsing again. My parents, the people who had raised me, had not only deliberately killed my son, but were now attempting to kill Isabella and me. For money, for their insatiable greed. I clutched the report, my heart heavy with grief, but a fire of determination ignited within me. "They will pay," I whispered. "For Samuel, for everything." The lab report lay on my desk, a silent accusation. The hidden camera footage, showing my mother surreptitiously sprinkling poison, the video from Robert's security system, capturing my father tampering with my car before the accident. All were pieces of a horrifying puzzle. My parents, the people I once considered family, had killed my son and were now trying to kill Isabella and me. For money, for their boundless avarice. Isabella stood beside me, her hands trembling, but her eyes resolute. "Henry," she said, her voice low but firm, "we can't wait any longer. We have to confront them. For Samuel." I nodded, each breath a struggle. "I know," I whispered, "but we need to do this correctly. We need the law on our side." I contacted Evelyn Reed, a highly skilled criminal defense attorney in Seattle, whom I'd met through a business associate. I sent her all the evidence, the videos, the toxicology report, and a recording from a private investigator of my mother's phone call, where she referred to Samuel's death as a planned accident. Evelyn listened gravely. "Henry," she said, her voice somber, "with this evidence, we can pursue charges of conspiracy to commit murder, attempted murder, and potentially homicide in connection with your son's death. But how do you want to proceed? Confront them directly or go straight to the police?" I paused, thinking of Samuel, of my mother's cold gaze, and my father's feigned smile. "I want to confront them," I said. "I want to hear them admit it, but I need you there, and the police too." Evelyn agreed, and we devised a strategy. That evening's dinner was heavy with unspoken tension, like a storm brewing on the horizon. I sat at the head of the table, my crutch beside me, attempting to maintain a calm exterior. My mother presented a casserole, flashing a strained smile. "Henry, Isabella," she said, her voice unnaturally gentle, "I made this especially for you too." My father sat across from me, sipping wine, his eyes flitting nervously over me. Evelyn and Officer Miller arrived precisely on time. I introduced them as business acquaintances, but I saw my mother stiffen when she recognized Officer Miller's uniform. "A police officer?" she asked, her voice wavering slightly. "Oh, that's unexpected." "Just a friendly dinner, Mom," I replied, forcing a smile. "Sit down. Let's eat." The meal began in strained silence. Isabella and I barely touched our food, citing a health-conscious diet. I noticed my mother glancing at our plates, irritation flashing in her eyes. Evelyn chatted casually, but Officer Miller remained observant, carefully scrutinizing everyone. Then I decided to break the silence. I turned on the dining room television, which I'd connected to my laptop. The security footage began to play, showing my father tampering with my car before the accident. "What did you do to the car that night, Dad?" "The brakes failed." "You knew that, didn't you?" My voice rose, unable to contain my anger. My father jumped up, his chair crashing to the floor. "Henry, what the hell is going on? Are you accusing your own parents?" he roared, his eyes wild with panic. Evelyn spoke, her voice calm yet firm. "Mr. and Mrs. Peterson," she said, "we have evidence of a slow-acting poison in Henry and Isabella's food. And this video," she gestured to the screen, now showing my mother sprinkling the poison from the glass jar, "shows you deliberately poisoning them." My mother burst into tears, covering her face. "Henry, I didn't want to," she sobbed. "Your father made me. He said we needed the money, that you didn't need all that wealth. I just followed along." Her confession struck me like a physical blow. I stared at her, the woman who had once sung me lullabies, now admitting to harming my family. My father shouted, interrupting her, "You liar. I didn't make you do anything." He lunged for the door, knocking over a chair. But Officer Miller was quicker. He apprehended my father, calling for backup on his radio. Within minutes, police sirens wailed outside. My father was handcuffed, his face a mixture of rage and desperation, as he was led to the patrol car. My mother collapsed into a chair, sobbing uncontrollably. "Henry, I'm sorry," she wailed. "I didn't mean for Samuel to die. It was just an accident." But her words held no meaning. I turned away, unable to bear her sight. Soon after, Officer Miller and his colleagues apprehended my mother. After conferring with Isabella, we decided to pursue legal action against my parents for murder, poisoning, and attempted murder. 3 months later, the trial commenced, captivating Seattle's media. Evelyn, representing our family, meticulously presented each piece of evidence, every frame of video, every lab result, every recorded conversation. Finally, the judge, a stern woman with a no-nonsense demeanor, stood to deliver the verdict. On the charge of first-degree murder in the death of Samuel Miller, the jury finds the defendants, Richard and Patricia Peterson, guilty. On the charges of conspiracy to commit murder and attempted murder against Henry and Isabella Miller, the jury finds the defendants guilty. The gavel fell, cold and decisive. My mother collapsed, sobbing. My father shouted, "You have no right," before being handcuffed and escorted from the courtroom. Isabella and I embraced, tears streaming down our faces. Tears not of joy, but of the simple, brutal truth. Justice had been served, but the pain and loss were too profound to ever fully heal. 1 year after the trial, Isabella and I visited Samuel's gravesite. The autumn wind gently rustled the leaves, carrying the scent of decaying vegetation and the quiet stillness of a gray afternoon. The small headstone, engraved with our son's name, Samuel James Miller, stood silently amidst the neatly manicured lawn. I knelt down, placing a bouquet of white lilies on the grave, my fingers tracing the inscription, as if I could somehow sense Samuel's warmth through the cold stone. Isabella stood beside me, one hand resting on her abdomen, the other gripping mine tightly. She was 7 months pregnant with another son, a new light in our lives. But today we were here for Samuel, to tell him we hadn't forgotten him. The past year had been a harrowing journey, filled with dark days and moments when I thought I couldn't continue. After the trial, when my parents were sentenced to life imprisonment, Isabella and I left the hillside mansion. That house, once the site of our dreams, was now filled only with painful memories. We moved to a smaller home in a coastal town an hour from Seattle. The new house wasn't as grand, but it was warm, with large windows overlooking the ocean and a small garden that Isabella tended to daily. We sought a place to begin anew, to heal, although we knew the wound of losing Samuel would always be a part of us. I severed all ties with my extended family on my parents' side. The relatives who had supported my parents, who had branded me a traitor during the trial, were merely faded memories. I realized that family isn't defined by blood. It's about those who love and protect you. Isabella, and now our unborn child, were my true family. Isabella and I established a charitable foundation in Samuel's name, dedicated to supporting families who have lost young children to accidents or crimes. We organized workshops to raise awareness about child safety, from selecting safe toys to inspecting home environments. Each time I addressed a group of parents, I shared Samuel's story, not to reopen old wounds, but to remind them that every child deserves protection. Isabella often stood by my side, recounting the warning signs, the chilling look in my mother's eyes, the small details we had overlooked. Trust your instincts, she always emphasized, her eyes shining with resolve. The foundation wasn't just a way to honor Samuel's memory, it was a lifeline out of the darkness. There were days when I awoke feeling suffocated by grief, consumed by thoughts of my son, but each thank you letter from a family we had helped, each smile from a protected child, gave me the strength to persevere. Today, standing at Samuel's grave, Isabella wore a loose sweater that concealed her rounded belly. "Do you think this little one will be like Samuel?" she asked, her voice soft but filled with hope. I looked at her, seeing the light in her eyes, and smiled. "I think so," I said. "He'll be just as wonderful as his big brother, and we'll protect him, no matter what." We'd chosen the name Ethan for our unborn child, a name meaning strong and enduring. We wanted Ethan to grow up in a safe world, free from the shadows that had enveloped Samuel. I placed my hand on Isabella's belly, feeling a gentle kick from Ethan, and my heart swelled with warmth. "You'll be our new joy, Ethan," I whispered, "and we'll tell you about your brother, so you know how amazing Samuel was." Isabella leaned her head on my shoulder, tears streaming down her face, but she smiled. "Samuel's watching us, Henry. I know he's smiling." I nodded, my throat tight. I pictured Samuel, his eyes sparkling like distant stars, watching over us from above. And I knew that though the pain would never completely fade, we would continue living. For him, for Ethan, and for ourselves. As we left the cemetery, a rare burst of Seattle sunshine pierced the clouds, illuminating our path. I held Isabella's hand, walking slowly, my crutch replaced by a sturdy cane. Our lives had been irrevocably altered, but I had learned a harsh lesson. Avarice can shatter even the most sacred bonds. I resolved to live more simply, focusing on what truly mattered: Isabella, Ethan, and Samuel's memory. We didn't need a sprawling mansion or the accolades of Forbes magazine. We only needed each other and a home filled with love. As our car traversed the coastal highway, Isabella softly hummed a familiar lullaby, the one she used to sing to Samuel. Her voice, gentle and resonant, filled the quiet car, and a flicker of hope ignited within me. Samuel would always be a part of us, and Ethan would be our guiding light, leading us out of the darkness. The legal proceedings against my parents had been exhaustive, but the justice system, imperfect as it was, had delivered a measure of closure. My parents remained incarcerated, their sentence a stark reminder of the consequences of their actions. The trial had been emotionally draining, but seeing them brought to justice offered some measure of solace, though it could never compensate for the loss of our son. The following years were a slow, painstaking process of healing. Isabella's pregnancy progressed smoothly, and Ethan's arrival brought a wave of joy that, while tinged with sorrow, nonetheless felt profound and genuine. Ethan was a healthy, happy child, and his presence filled our home with laughter once more. We established a robust routine, carefully shielding Ethan from the harsh realities of the past. We spoke often of Samuel, sharing stories and cherishing memories. Ethan grew up knowing his older brother, not just as a name on a headstone, but as a beloved sibling whose memory was woven into the fabric of our family life. Isabella and I both found ways to channel our grief into productive work. We continued to run the charity, using our experience to support others, helping to prevent similar tragedies and offering a lifeline to families struggling with the devastating loss of a child. The memory of Samuel and the events that led to his untimely demise continued to cast a long shadow over our lives. But time and the love we shared slowly but surely began to mend our broken hearts. The physical and emotional scars remained, a constant reminder of our loss, but they served as a testament to our resilience. They served as a reminder of the evil that can fester within a family, but they were also a reminder of the powerful bonds that can survive even the most profound tragedies. The house by the sea became a sanctuary of peace, a place where memories of Samuel were cherished, not mourned. Ethan grew into a bright, curious boy, inheriting both his mother's intelligence and his father's entrepreneurial spirit. He was a reminder of the future, of the boundless capacity for hope and healing. He was a testament to the enduring power of love. We had found our way back to joy, but the journey was long and arduous. The road to healing is never easy, especially when the wounds are so deep, but with each passing year, the sharp edges of grief began to soften, and we were able to embrace the new chapters of our lives. One crisp autumn evening, years after the events that had irrevocably altered our lives, I sat with Isabella on the porch of our home. Ethan was asleep upstairs, and a soft, golden light bathed the ocean. We held hands, a silent comfort between us. "He's still with us, isn't he?" Isabella whispered, her voice soft. I nodded, my gaze fixed on the endless horizon. In every sunrise, in every wave, in every laugh of Ethan, I whispered back. The memory of Samuel remained, a painful but essential part of who we are, a constant reminder of the fragility of life and the enduring power of love. And as the waves crashed gently against the shore, I felt a sense of peace. The darkness had receded. The healing was nearly complete. We had found our way back to each other, and to a life that, while forever marked by loss, had finally found a measure of serenity.